All right. Well, it wouldn't be a PD's Picks podcast if there weren't issues and trouble and technical difficulties. This is the second time I've had to do this podcast today. First time I recorded it, I won't get into all the details. File was too big, wouldn't upload, couldn't transfer, couldn't do whatever. So here we are again. You don't know that. I know that. So we're going to run through this a second time. That's good though. That's okay. I'll iron out the mistakes from the first time around. We'll clean things up. It'll be a better presentation here with the second go around. Couple things I want to get into. One thing I was planning on getting into today. We might have to put that on the back burner or not go as deep with it as I was hoping to today. I'll get into that in a minute. But um, new things on the website as well, pdspicks.com if you want to check that out. Again, PD's Picks, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Here on YouTube, if you could like and subscribe, that'd be a big help as well. That way you don't miss any updates from me. I told you all episodes of the podcast are going on YouTube first and probably live like this for the foreseeable future as well. So subscribe, you'll never miss another one. Get a notification when we go live, the whole nine. So definitely don't want to miss any of that. So, okay. So one thing I wanted to get into, probably should do a better job of, but I saw a bunch of uh, notifications over the last week or so of college commits. A lot of kids from the state of Michigan verbally committing to various schools. A couple of them jumped out to me, and I was like, shoot, there was two, three, four, like all within a couple of days of each other. And I'm like, all right, I gotta kind of recap and kind of fill everybody in on where some prospects are heading and kind of what that landscape looks like. So let me see if I can find it real quick. There is a piece, I put it up this morning on pdspicks.com that goes into everybody from the state of Michigan who's made a commitment in the last month. You can check that out there, but and get all the details that I may or may not touch up on here on the podcast. So biggest thing to me was Nick Kosiba and Gavin Locke, '07 Little Caesars teammates. Both of them made verbal commitments, I think in the last week, to go to Western Michigan. Both are slated right now to be incoming freshmen for the class of 2027. As we know, college hockey is a bit of a different beast than college basketball, college football. Once you graduate high school, you could go straight to college. You could spend a year, 2 years in juniors. So that I'm calling it a projected incoming class of 2027 because schools could lose a recruit, lose a commitment from 26 or 25, and now that opens the door for one of these prospects to come in, maybe even ahead of schedule or a little sooner than expected. So college hockey, obviously a much different animal than some of the other ones. Anyway, both of them heading to Western. Western, obviously a top 25, top 15 program in the country last year, and has really, I feel like, kind of been on the rise the last couple of years. So getting it done there with some homegrown talent. As I mentioned, I think those are the only two in the class so far. Um, '07s, I believe, and you can fact check me or correct me on this if I'm wrong, but first day '07s could officially make verbal commitments was August 1st, which is why you've seen a bit of a slew of college commits here in the last, I don't know, 3 weeks. Obviously, I'm keying in on kind of the local guys here from the state of Michigan, but there's been a lot of commits nationwide among some of the top '07 prospects. Let me give you a bit of a snapshot here, just as far as Western, what they have coming in over the next couple of years. I think it's important to kind of look at that when you see prospects making commitments to schools, is looking at what they're graduating, what they're bringing in. 2027 is a couple of years away, and a lot could change over those next couple of years in terms of who the program graduates, who leaves, who comes in. So it's very fluid and a lot could change. But to give you a bit of a snapshot here, I think the 24, 25, and 26 classes. I believe I had Western bringing in, I think 20 forwards between now and 2027 when we'd see these '07s on campus. So I don't know offhand how that stacks up compared to other universities or what that typically looks like. So, but just kind of gives you a bit of a snapshot of incoming classes, what they're bringing in terms of forward, defense, goalies, that whole thing. So, another '07 Caesars teammate of theirs, Evan Jardine, also made a commitment to Harvard. I saw that. A little smarty pants there going to Harvard. But another projected to be in the class of 2027. That's the fourth commit that Harvard got for that particular class. I talked about Jardine on a recent article on pdspicks.com. Just kind of highlighted some of the standouts from the USA Hockey Select 16 camp. Jardine was the leading scorer of that select camp. I think somebody even told me he broke the camp record for most points in a single camp. So he's obviously had a real solid summer, and then obviously you add in the college commit there as well. That '07 Caesars team, I think we all know that it was loaded with studs for the last couple of years. They've got three kids off of that team that made the NTDP roster for the upcoming season. You got three more here making college commits right out of the gate. So obviously a real strong group there as advertised. And I'm sure that we'll continue to see a couple more college commits trickle out from that '07 team. So I'll briefly mention a couple more. I saw Cole Tumanaro, Landon Nix. I think that's how you say that. Landon Nix. They also made college commits out of OJG, pair of defensemen there. I'm just now kind of starting to get into the AAA circles and keeping an eye on some of those guys and paying attention. But Tumanaro, Nix, I'd be pretty impressed if they were skating as a pair last year. That's a hell of a top pair defenseman if that's what you had there on the back end. Tumanaro heading to Cornell, and then Nix is going to UMass Amherst. So I wanted to make note of that. Tumanaro is an '07, just like the others I've mentioned so far, but I believe Elite Prospects had him projected as a member of the class of 2026. So slight variation there, but wanted to at least point that out. And then the last one I'll mention here too, he's an '06, so not really lumped in with those '07s, but Brecken Smith, longtime Little Caesars prospect. He also verbally committed to Miami, Ohio. He's another one who I think I watched all of the Michigan District games from the Select 17 camp. So the older age group watched all those games. Brecken Smith got better and better as that camp went on, and was one of the top performers for the Michigan District here. So good month of July for him, and then obviously a good month of August as well. So that'll wrap up college commits there. Did want to provide a bit of a snapshot. There's more details, like I said, on the site as well. I think I included a link in the description if you want to check that out. So everything you need to know there. Probably need to make a bit of a habit of doing this like once a month, kind of updating all the college commits from the state of Michigan, where they're going, what that picture looks like, and just keep tabs on that moving forward. So so what I wanted to do today, I put it out on Twitter. I was delaying the podcast a little bit because I thought the MHSAA executive team had a meeting yesterday to kind of shore up, finalize any co-ops, division realignment, any movement. One program gets bumped up to D2, or because of the realignment, another program gets bumped down. I thought that was going to be finalized yesterday. Exchanged a couple texts with Cody Inglis. Sounds like a lot of it is finalized, but it's not like published or publicized or pen to paper official anywhere yet. So I wanted to kind of, depending on how much movement there was, what that movement might do to potential playoff regions. If you had a top team opt up, that how that could change the landscape or the playoff picture for that particular division. That was my hope for today. Obviously, we're not going to be able to get to that because all those details, like I said, haven't been finalized yet. So, unfortunately, may have to continue kicking that can down the road and maybe get into that next week or somewhere down the line. But I'm still going to get into playoff talk and wanted to get into the playoff format, playoff structure, because it's something that I've always dwelled on, always been hung up on. I think playoffs in general are a pretty hot topic for anybody involved, whether it's coaches, players, parents. It's just one of those things I think everybody has an opinion on, and wants to sound off on. But so I was going to give my 2 cents on that, shed some light on minor changes that I think could have pretty significant impact on the high school hockey landscape, high school hockey playoff landscape. So I'll get into that here. So I wanted to, these numbers are definitely not official. There's definitely subject to change. But what I was seeing right now, anyways, was 48 teams in Division One, 40 teams in Division Two, 41 teams in Division Three, 129 teams total, which would be the exact same as what we were at last year. I believe this would be, if that all holds true, this would be the first year numbers didn't decline year over year. I know we had been on a pretty steady 8, 9, maybe even 10-year run where this year's number of programs was fewer than the year before. So it's been at a steady decline for a couple of years now. So if it does finally kind of plateau this year, I think that would obviously be a positive for a lot of us around the state. But so 129 teams, we're still dividing those programs into 3 divisions. We've had the 3 division format since 2000, so we're going on almost 25 years now. And to me, I think that's one thing. I don't want to say it's holding back the high school playoff system, but I do believe we could benefit greatly from eliminating a division. Prior to 2000, it was a 2 division format. It was Class A and then Class B, C, and D all lumped into one. I think if we go back to a similar structure, it would do a lot of good for a lot of different reasons. I'll get into that in a minute. But 2000, we went from 2 divisions to 3 divisions. The sport was on the rise. It was growing immensely. Tons of new programs, tons of new teams, players, kids joining. Hockey in general, AAA travel numbers were way better 25 years ago than they are now. So the MHSAA expanded from 2 divisions to 3. In 2000, there was 134 programs across the state that filled those 3 divisions. That number continued to rise over the next couple of years, and I think peaked around 180 teams in the state. So it made sense to have 3 divisions then. But since 2000, I'd have to do my homework. I'll say 2012. The number of programs has declined, like I said, every year since then. So the problem is we've continued to operate as if it's 2010, 2012, that we do have 180 teams when we, in fact, only have 2/3 of that. So I feel like we're on the other end of this bell curve now, and would seem to benefit from downsizing that playoff format now and going from 3 divisions down to 2. Now I know that raises a lot of questions. One, you're eliminating a state champion right off the top. You would go from having 3 champions now to 2. Like, that's not going to go over super well. I understand that, but it's logistics. We don't have as many teams. We can't support as many champions. So to me, like I said, that just seems like a pretty simple fix right off the top. So what does that do? Well, it's going to give you full regionals now. It's going to give you regions of 7, 8, 10, 12 teams, even in some instances. And I know on the surface, you're probably like, well, that doesn't even logistically make sense, or it would be too hard to do, or like there's too many teams for one region. I would encourage you to go look at the regional setup in Minnesota. We all love the Minnesota model. We all rave over Minnesota's product and their high school state tournament. Minnesota has regions of 10 and 12 teams. Minnesota had 145 programs last year, according to my hockey rankings, 68 in Class 2A, 77 in Class A. And so again, they have more programs than we do and fewer divisions. Basically, is what that boils down to me. If now there's been a lot of incremental changes to the playoff format over the last couple of years. The biggest one, obviously, being seeding at the regional level. Well, currently, and I challenge you to find how many regions of 7 and 8 teams we have in the state currently, because I believe it's only 1, maybe 2 of 8 teams in a region. But we are seeding a lot of playoff format or regional playoffs that are 4 teams, 5 teams. A lot of regions have 6 or less teams. So by cutting down the number of divisions, you now have more teams in each division, which now means you have more teams in each regional. So instead of seeding 1 through 4, we're now seeding 1 through 8, 1 through 10, 1 through 12. And in my opinion, making a regional championship mean that much more. What I mean by that is I think a regional championship has maybe lost its luster a little bit to some of the big time programs around the state. I think to a good majority, it still means a lot, and it's still something very much that programs play for and celebrate. But I also think there's a good amount of programs around the state that it's kind of become commonplace to the point where we don't even touch it. We hardly smile in pictures. Oh, we won our 6th regional in a row. Like it's just not. It's not as much of an achievement, I think, in the grand scheme of things as it once was to some of those top teams. So again, you make that regional 8, 10, 12 teams. Now it's a journey. Now it's a grind. You got to win 3, 4 games against some tough competition to even get out of your regional and qualify for the state tournament. I think that would add a ton of luster back to the first couple of rounds of the playoffs. Not to mention the benefits of seeding, like and having those matchups. If you have a 9-10, or what would it be, an 8-9 play-in game to then play the number 1 team, that 8-9 matchup is actually going to be pretty competitive. It's going to be a 4-2, 5-3 type game. And then the winner obviously goes on to play the number 1 seed, which statistically and looking at the current format, that number 1 team has handled business more times than not. But it would, by putting your 8-9 seeds against each other or your 7-10s, however it shakes out, you're getting a good first round playoff game before a potential blowout or before a potential one-sided game. What I think that does would then limit the amount of blowout games that you tend to see in the first couple rounds of the playoffs. And even the late rounds too. The harder that process is in the first couple rounds, the more you're going to weed teams out. And by the final 8, by the final 4, you really have some of the top teams in each division, and you're gonna eliminate a lot of those high scoring lopsided games. So hopefully I'm doing that justice. I know that's a little bit hard without using tangible or real world examples and programs and team names and things like that. But if in our current format, both the 8 and the 9 seed team is getting slaughtered in the first round, they're struggling in that first round to 7-0, 10-1 type games. If they're now playing each other to then advance to play the number one seed, now you have a competitive game plus that tough matchup with the number one seed. You're getting at the game before that ultimate potential, anyways, lopsided game that we're already seeing. So I think would just immensely change the playoff picture. Um, Now, I think the common question then is, how do you split them up? What's the process for splitting those two teams or splitting teams into those two divisions? Right off the bat, you could continue to do it the way it is now based off of enrollment. I don't love the enrollment format for hockey. Hockey is just a different animal. We were talking about it with college commitments and everything. Football, basketball, enrollment very much plays a factor because there's more athletes in the school. And if I'm at Macomb, Dakota, I'm getting every football player in the school to play for my football team. Hockey is not that way. Every school has a hockey kid who's, maybe not every school, but a lot of schools have hockey players in the school system that are playing elsewhere. They're playing AAA. They're playing travel hockey somewhere else, as opposed to playing for their high school. So I think basing your divisions off of enrollment is misguided, in my opinion. You look at some of the perennial top programs over the last couple of years, a Hancock or Houghton, Marquette. Some of those schools have some of the smaller enrollments in the entire state. Yet they are leaps and bounds more competitive than some of these other schools with 10 times the enrollment. You've got schools with 3, 4, 2, 3,000 student body, and yet their hockey team is not just in the bottom half of the rankings in the state, but in the bottom 10, bottom 20 in the state even. So I just don't think the enrollment does it justice for high school hockey and where we're at. Could you continue to use that in a 2 division format? Absolutely. I just think, again, in PD's perfect world, that would not be my methodology of choice. I think if we did go down to 2 divisions, the other knee-jerk divider line is public-private. I know that's been a point of contention for a lot of years. I see it a bunch on social media whenever the playoff conversation comes up, and a lot of people beating that drum over, they can recruit and we can't do this, and a lot of noise. Ultimately, splitting public and private would not be my first choice. It to me is just something. If you look at it over the course of a season, or you look at it over the course of the last couple of years, water tends to find its level. I remember, I don't know, a couple of years ago, people were outraged because 2 of the 3 state champions were private schools, and the public schools just can't compete. And I was like, literally go back 12 months. All 3 public schools had won state titles the year before, yet you weren't hearing, cries from private schools about not being able to compete or whatever it may be. So I think over time the pendulum tends to find that middle ground. But if you look over the course and crunch the numbers, as I have, and looked at public versus private programs throughout the course of the year, that win-loss percentage is still pretty close to 50%. I want to say it tips in the private school's favor, like 55, 58%. Like it's not egregious. It's not drastic. Constantly year after year, you see Trenton beat U of D, or Grosse Pointe South beat De La Salle, or Heartland hanging with CC, or Granville over Grand Rapids Christian. Like there's tons of instances where public schools are regularly competing with and beating private schools. So in my opinion, it's not an issue of haves and have-nots or anything like that. A lot of people will be very quick to point out CC, and I get it, right? They've been the most dominant program over the last 3 years, and maybe the most dominant we've ever seen in high school hockey. Credit to Brandon Conley. That program has been sensational over the last couple of years. Um, to those people, to the people that are clamoring for a public-private split because of CC, I don't think that's a public-private problem. I think it's a CC problem, and I mean that in the most respectful way possible. Like, we don't have a public-private problem. We have a CC problem, and the CC problem is they're just too freaking good. um, and like I said, I've been thoroughly impressed these last couple of years. I know there's plenty of people around the state who maybe scoff at or aren't as happy about it, but I have a ton of respect for what they've been able to accomplish over the last couple of years, and um, I'm not ignorant or blind to the fact that they've have some resources and have been able to do some things that other programs can't. But ultimately, you still got to put the work in, and you still got to, you still got to go out there and win and run a good program and create good prospects and execute systems and all that stuff. So, um, I look at regional championship with their JV squad, and I look at their playoff run last year, not giving up a single goal. That is extremely dominant, and it's been an unbelievable run. Again, I do think at some point water will start to find its level. Maybe the competition starts to catch up with CC and competes a little bit better. Maybe CC has a couple down years and they don't have some of the horses they've had over the last couple. Like I said, I don't think it's a public-private problem. I think it's a CC problem. And again, with the utmost respect to what they've accomplished. So I just think water will start to find its level a little bit, and CC's dominance, CC's reign might not come to an end, but it might be a little more attainable for some of these other programs around the state. And as the season gets closer, we'll definitely get into that. I got a lot of thoughts on CC this year in particular, a lot of thoughts on some of the other contenders this year around the state. I think that gap could be closed pretty quickly, and even as soon as this year. And obviously, like I said, we'll talk about that more as the season wears on. But yeah, 2 cents there. Public private to me doesn't really seem the way to go either. I'm going to try to get to this quick. I'm finally getting to Petey's perfect world and kind of how I see this unveiling, and I'm already almost 30 minutes in, so I apologize for being a little bit long here. But ultimately, to me, I think that split between one division and the second division is your standalone programs and your co-op programs. And before I really ruffle any feathers or piss anybody off in the co-op circles, it's not a hard line in my mind. It's your standalone programs, your CCs, Brightons, Heartlands, Houghton, Calumet, Alpena, Traverse City Central. You get those standalone programs in one division, and then your co-ops in another. And co-ops, competitive co-ops who there's co-ops for a couple different reasons, and I don't want to lose sight of that, but there's a lot of co-ops in the space today that are co-oping to stay alive. If we don't co-op, if we don't add another school, we're not going to have enough players to field a team. So I understand that. That's not lost on me. There are some other co-ops around the state that are super competitive as co-ops. Forest Hills Northeastern, Cap City, Bay Reps. Like, there's a lot of high-end co-ops as well. My thought then is you allow co-ops to opt up. If I'm a high-end co-op and I want to be with the quote unquote big dogs, and I want to go up against the Stevensons and the Novis of the world and whatnot, co-ops have that option to opt up then into what I'll say is Division One or the standalone division. And the quick response there, as I know, is okay, well, if I'm a middle of the pack or low level standalone program, I'm just going to pull the ripcord and co-op with the podunk school next to me. Now I'm a co-op, but I'm still basically the same team. And now I get to go down to the lower level and legitimately compete for a regional or for a state championship, as opposed to trying to go up against the De La Salles and Brother Rices and Trentons of the world. Fair. And you know what? If that's the route you want to go, have at it, is kind of my thought. If programs want to do that, in my mind, it's kind of the coward's way out. Like if that's what you want to do, and you want to co-op so that you can go down to a lower level, there's no easy way to win a state title. Just because, let's say Stevenson gets lumped in and they co-op with Franklin and Churchill, who just recently co-opted. Let's say it becomes a big Livonia co-op. It's still not an easy road to a state championship. You're still going to have to go through tough teams. So there is no easy path. Just by co-op, an easy path of winning a co-op state championship either. What I do think it does is makes that standalone division, that state champion, legitimately the best team in the state, which we haven't been able to really do that over the last couple of years. Now, CC, for instance, has won the Division I state championship the last couple of years and is very almost undisputed like best team in the state. However, that's not always the case amongst a lot of people. Is what division is the hardest? And sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 3. Rarely over the last 10 years have people said Division I was the best division of the 3. I think if you go to that 2-division format, you go to standalones co-op, there's no doubt what division is the top division, and the winner of that top division would undoubtedly be the best team. Like I said, you still offer co-ops the option to opt up, compete with the big guys. If one of those schools wants to co-op so they can drop down, have at it. Ultimately, I think it would benefit a lot of those co-ops too, where I mentioned people are co-oping just so their program can survive and can continue another year, 2 years, 3 years. Now imagine if all those co-ops got to compete against each other, and ultimately you're going to decide a co-op state champion. I think that does a lot in terms of growth in those areas of the state where now that co-op wins a state championship. What does that do for youth hockey in that area, developing, getting interest amongst some of the younger kids, and then wanting to play for those potential co-ops? And maybe it even helps grow those co-ops into now standalone programs of their own. I can't remember the last time a co-op has won a state title. Like, imagine if we could do that every single year, and you get some of those co-op programs that are now winning state titles, even if it is looked as tier 2 state champion, it's still a state championship nonetheless, and very much a program builder for some of these co-ops around the state. So to me, that's your best path forward. That's your best structure. I love talking playoffs, playoff format, playoff fixes. I've had a lot of conversations over the years with people on social, and I do think they tend to get a little whimsical or swept away in, wow, we have all the host sites at each major university, and 1 through 32, and we rank the whole don't overcomplicate it. That's one thing I've come to learn about the MHSAA, high school sports in general. It's got to be as simple and basic and straightforward as possible. To get super complicated with hosts, one I know is always a tricky one with MHSAA, finding schools, locations that can host regionals, host quarterfinals, and then obviously the state finals. That's always a challenge. And then obviously the complexity of some of the ideas I've heard thrown around over the years. So again, simple fix. You go back to 2 divisions. Co-op standalone would be my preferred method of madness. If you somehow get a whole bunch of standalones who want to co-op and go down to the secondary division, have at it. Ultimately, I think the best will stay, and you will still have, maybe it's 25 standalone teams, maybe it's 35 standalone teams. it's a way for, if you think you're a top dog or you're in the mix for among those top programs, it's a way to almost kind of force the MHSAA's hand where, if we want to have a top 32 teams playoff system, the top 32 teams are going to stay in Division One. Those top 32 teams, if you believe you're a top 32 team in the state, you're not going to pull the ripcord in co-op so that you can go down. You're going to stay in that top 32 because you want to compete amongst those top 32. So, like I said, ultimately, I think the people who believe they're top dogs would stay in that top division and duke it out like hell to ultimately prove who that top team is in the state. I know there was a lot of rumblings and programs trying to band together and, hey, let's make D1 great again, and we're all gonna opt up. If we're not in D1, we're gonna make ourselves D1. There were some rumblings of that years ago where programs were talking about, like, well, what if we all go up? I think it would be great for high school hockey if all of the top programs competed in the same division, because it would be great matchups. It would be great hockey. You'd get regionals and state tournaments worth scouting wire to wire and have scouts in the building for some of these big games. So could be extremely beneficial. I know I've very much the last couple minutes, but playoff hockey, man, gets me fired up. And like I said, I love talking about it. So if you have any thoughts, feel free to hit me up as always. PD's Picks, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Mentioned it before. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's a big help as well. PDspicks.com has a whole bunch of information. I'm periodically adding more and more information to it. I want to mention, though, too, if you go to pdspicks.com/players, I've started to add player profiles and notes, evaluations on kids I've seen so far this fall. Is it fall? This month, from MHA Showcase. I'll get MDH guys up there soon. Golf Classic this weekend. Fox Motors is there. I think OJG, Victory Honda, and then MHA obviously is there as well. But anyways, pdspicks.com/players. It's very ugly right now. I'm still working. I gotta dress it up, make it a little more appealing, but all the information is there and the information is good. So a whole bunch of players that I've written about, I'll continue to add them to that. And I'm missing a bunch of information too. I know I'm classes, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, lefty, righty, height, weight. Like, I'm missing a lot of information. So you come across your page, you come across your kid's page, feel free to DM me and let me know the actual information, and I'll get that up on the site. Can also email me, contact pdspicks@gmail.com. I'll put that link in the description as well, so you guys have it. Open to mailbags. You want to shoot me questions, topics, things you want me to talk about as far as high school hockey, AAA, college commitment, tournaments in youth hockey, what to go to, what not to go to. There's a lot of things we could talk about. So feel free to connect with me any way you see fit. Always available, always looking to talk hockey. And yeah, we'll wrap it up there. This was way better than the first go around, I'll tell you that much. So annoyed that I had to reshoot it, but the reshoot went way better than the first one. So practice maybe doesn't make perfect. We'll continue to trial and error the PD's Picks podcast production. How about that for alliteration? As we get nearer to the season. So till next time, skate hard, have fun. I'll see you guys at the rink.